8:32 East Coast time. There's like a good moment to start this video. Here in Asheville, North Carolina, yet again. So I want to talk about earthquakes and earth changes related to Comet Elenin and how planetary alignments and comets can amplify these effects drastically. I'm going to go through some math and some previous instances and future instances relating to this comet and also Comet Honda, which is another comet that is very close to our vicinity at the moment, closer than Elenin at the moment. So, the first case study to use is off the coast of Chile from February 11th this year. At that point, Comet Elenin made an alignment with the Earth and the Sun. Now, when you have planetary bodies, comets, just to call a comet a planet for a second, because to me it's the birthstone of where a planet comes from, is it causes the gravitational fluctuations that objects make, the waves they radiate outwards, to amplify. However, depending where those objects are in relation to those alignments, you can get constructive or deconstructive interference in relation to the golden ratio. So, with Chile, the Chilean earthquake focused on right here off the coast. And so, at that moment, the alignment, the focal point of the alignment was out here in the Pacific, but the moon was over here. So the notion is there's an averaging of these two forces. The thing to realize is the gravitational force of the moon is mostly constant. It changes slightly with the monthly cycles, but the difference in effect is where the comet is in relation to the sun and the Earth, and also where the Earth is in relation to the yearly cycle, because it's not a perfect circular orbit around the sun, it's also an ellipse. And most orbits are slightly elliptical, if not extremely elliptical, such as a comet, which is an extremely elongated elliptical orbit. And so the thing to understand is when we have these two forces on different parts of the planet, there's an averaging of those gravitational forces, which if we said they were even, would be halfway, would be this point in Chile. I don't know the exact difference between the gravitational forces at that moment to average them, but a bigger point to even think about is the weakest link. And where's the weakest link at that point? Because the weakest link is what's going to be pulled during that event. The thing that happened a year before, on February 27th, in almost the exact same spot, there was an earthquake. So the idea is to figure out where there's the greatest instability of the plate, to where if there's a pull on the plate, it could cause an earthquake. Something to take a look at, I can get to think about this concept, is about the tide. And if we have the tide here, we have the high tide and low tide, and the moon is going to pull on the planet in a specific spot. So the moon will pull the high tide, or pull the water farther out. The image basically says everything. This also relates to a lot of how the other gravitational forces will affect the planet. So if we look at Japan, on that day, Japan, the moon was off here in the coast at the point of the earthquake, and the alignment point was down here around Indonesia. So there's an averaging of these two forces. Actually, it was right here was the alignment point. And because it was near the equinox, it's closer toward the equator. If it was, say, during winter solstice, it'd be below the equator, and closer to the summer solstice, it'd be above the equator. And so the other notion would be then, where's the weakest link? There was an earthquake in Japan at that time before it, which possibly could have weakened the plate to cause the larger earthquake to happen. There's lots of factors at play. What I'm trying to reveal is that the major factors at play in this are the alignments and the moon. The moon is a major multiplier of the effect, but not the cause. So one thing also to put out there is, a lot of people say, oh, Japan was caused by HAARP. What I think I've started to pick up on HAARP is a conspiracy theory within a conspiracy theory, and that they're trying to take people's attention, this is PSYOPs, away from what's really going on in terms of natural cycles. They don't want us to focus on Comet Elenin, or they do in terms of fear. There's really the whole dynamic in terms of really getting to the core of PSYOPs, is really to mindfuck us and not know what exactly is going on, to show us the truth and to show us a fake truth, so you're feeling both of them so we can't choose. You don't feel the real truth, we'll be like, well, that's obviously the truth because they're not telling us about that. They're putting everything on the board to mindfuck us. So, let's go to September 6th, which is in half an hour for me. On September 6th, we have an alignment with Honda. Honda is extremely close to the planet right now. And at it's 13 hours UTC, there's an alignment, and that focal point will just, because we're not at the equinox yet, will just be above this equator. And that point is going to be around Guinea, Sierra Leone, Cape Verde. This point right here will be a focus point of the celestial energy between the Earth, the comet, and the Sun. Now what's interesting though, this didn't happen with the other two alignments, is the point where the comet is exactly square of the golden ratio. So what you're going to have is pure constructive interference. To understand this concept, I'd recommend looking into Dan Winters and him talking about constructive interference, understanding the golden ratio. What's interesting about Japan is the distance the comet was from the sun at that point was 3.141 AUs, astronomical units. 1 AU is the distance from the Earth to the sun. It happens to be exactly pi. It's just interesting. My focal point is more the golden ratio. So if we get back to this map, we have the focal point of energy right here around the Cape Verde Islands, but the moon is right over Indonesia. Okay, so we have these two gravitational points between the Cape Verde Islands and Indonesia. Well, what is interesting is about 7-8 hours ago, there was a 6.6 earthquake in Indonesia. Just like in Japan, there was a moderate-sized earthquake before the major earthquake, before the alignment. So right now, there is a weak point in Indonesia, which could be the weakest link. There's a lot of talk, especially in Zeta Talk, if you know those guys, that Indonesia will sink. And there's already been signs showing that Indonesia is sinking. There's massive amounts of landslides and parts of the coast going underwater and sinkholes. And Indonesia had its first crop circles back in February. It had 5 of them. And to me, it was a sign, relating to that the ley line systems in Indonesia are failing. One of the crop circles related to the energetic structure of a pyramid. And to me, it was almost like guys saying, if a pyramid is not placed here, Indonesia will fall. Indonesia will sink. So the alignment time is around 13 UTC, which East Coast time is about 9 in the morning, is when this alignment will take place. And it's a pure constructive interference, which did not happen with the other two alignments. All right, so the next one is September 26th, the infamous date a lot of people have been talking about. On September 26th, at around between 1600 hours and 1900 hours UTC is when I feel like there will be a pole shift. The reason why I have a fluctuation in time is there's two interesting points in terms of data. However, at 1900 hours is when there is pure constructive interference between Comet Elenin and the Earth, because Comet Elenin is the golden ratio difference from the Sun to the Earth, 1.618. At 1600 hours, it is 0.618 astronomical units from the Sun. So there's this little window where the alignment's taking place, and it's hard to exactly get the alignment with the data that NASA provides. But so in that little window, there's constructive interference, and it's the golden ratio, while Honda, it's the square of the golden ratio. And what's interesting is the alignment is focused around the Galapagos. It's focused in this area off the coast, the western coast of Ecuador, is the alignment point, while the moon is more over the center of the Pacific, south of the Hawaiian Islands. And so you have these 2 points very close to each other, because around, I think it's 7 o'clock in the morning the next day, I have it written down, the new moon is at 1200 hours UTC. There's a new moon on September 27th. So the moon is almost completely in front of the Earth during this event. So the two are really close to each other during this constructive interference point. A big difference, though, to think about, as I was saying before, February 11th, the comet was 3.479 AUs from the Sun. On March 11th, it was 3.141 AUs from the Sun. But on September 26th, it's only around 0.618 AUs from the Sun. It's dramatically closer. So the gravitational pull around the Galapagos is going to be much, much greater. And this relates to Alex Retrov in the new documentary he came out, his hour-long lecture of how the Pacific Plate is going to fail. And the main notion is that the Pacific Plate is going to be drastically pulled upwards, just like in this picture, right, with the tides. But this is more of a effect even on the plates themselves around that point. I really recommend people watching that hour-long lecture Alex Retrov did about, I think it's labeled September 25th as the date in it. I don't know why he talks about September 25th, or why it's labeled, but he talks about September 26th. I think it's just a mislabeling of the video. It's a really excellent video. So the thing where I'm showing is how the alignments have gravitational effects on the planets, and how the moon is a major multiplier of the effect. However, at different points where the alignments take place, you have either constructive or deconstructive interference. Constructive interference drastically increases the gravitational pull, while deconstructive interference is what people would call as an anti-gravitic effect, even though anti-gravity is really a bad term for what's actually going on. Some people could even say nullifying gravity, but there'd be a pushing instead of a pulling. So there it is. We'll see what happens tomorrow with the alignment with Honda, and start thinking more about the September 26th alignment, and really thinking about what you want to do right here, presently. Because you can put your awareness into the future, but then you get trapped into that awareness in the future. And you can bring your awareness right here, and you can do what Rossi's doing and be a ninja. So being present is key, and finding your center and your grounding is one of the most important things we can do as human beings right now. Otherwise, there's my little science lesson on alignments and constructive and deconstructive interference. As I said, if you really want to understand that concept of constructive and deconstructive interference, look at Dan Winter and his work. Thank you for listening, and namaste. Hey everybody, it's Gregory Arturo. It's 11:22 East Coast time. It feels like a good moment to start this video. Here in Asheville, North Carolina, yet again. So I want to talk about earthquakes and earth changes related to Comet Elenin, and how planetary alignments and comets can amplify these effects drastically. I'm going to go through some math and some previous instances and future instances relating to this comet, and also Comet Honda, which is another comet that is very close to our vicinity at the moment, closer than Elenin at the moment. So the first case study to use is off the coast of Chile from February 11th this year. At that point, Comet Elenin made an alignment with the Earth and the Sun. Now, when you have planetary bodies, comets, let's just call a comet a planet for a second, because to me it's the birthstone of where a planet comes from, is it causes the gravitational fluctuations that objects make, the waves they radiate outwards, to amplify. However, depending where those objects are in relation to those alignments, you can get constructive or deconstructive interference in relation to the golden ratio. So with Chile, the Chilean earthquake focused on right here off the coast. And so at that moment, the alignment, the focal point of the alignment was out here in the Pacific, but the moon was over here. So the notion is there's an averaging of these two forces. The thing to realize is the gravitational force of the moon is mostly constant. It changes slightly with the monthly cycles, but the difference in effect is